This episode of iFanboy is brought to you by Brain Tonic, Squarespace.com, and GoDaddy.com.
Mr. Flanagan, where do you stand on photo referencing?
Now, this is a subject that requires a lot of thought.
Don't dodge the question.
Well, some artists...
Yelling!
Some artists will say that they want to explore through reality.
And you think the American people are going to buy that? Hello, and welcome to a very topical episode of iFanboy. My name is Ron.
Or Movie Phone.
And I'm here with...
Connor.
And I'm Josh.
We're talking about the issues.
Unless you're... Yes, we're going to talk about the issues.
Okay.
We're down.
I'm very charged
He's
here.
been studying Fox News. Unless you've been under a rock, or in a rock, you have noticed there's a lot of politics going on everywhere all the time for the last seemingly 40 years. No, I would say. That's how long it feels.
We're in an election year here in America for our,
in an election
for our domestic
half-decade.
viewers. Our international viewers are also aware of the fact that we're in an election.
Canada just had elections.
They did?
It's election time, yeah.
It's election time.
It's
It's that time of year.
It is.
Yeah.
And it does not escape the purview of the comic book world. Politics rear themselves in all sorts of ways in comics, whether it's writers and artists doing things, making their own comments on stuff, or telling stories, or using their stories to come up with a political system of their own.
Comics have always had a say in politics. The old editorial cartoons of the late 1800s and stuff like that were some of the beginnings of comics, were kind of political satire and things like that. For some reason, a lot of people find it easy to share political views or political jokes in drawn form, like kind of cartoony.
Humor is always the most potent weapon. And that's used through comics and cartoons and things like that. And
but even otherwise, like Captain America, in early 40s by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, that was a political statement. That book, he was punching Hitler, and that was before we were
in the war.
Way before we were in the war.
Hitler in the face.
It was considered to be like half America was like, oh, I don't know if you can do that. So
you can punch Hitler.
I don't think anyone would say no to that.
But back then, many people did. The Bund, for example.
So
it's a different show.
So it's by no surprise that this year's presidential election has had there's been some comics that have touched upon it, and also there have been comics that deal with politics just in general in a broader sense. So we thought we'd since politics are on tip of everybody's tongue.
The most sort of obvious answer is these two books that came out from IDW. Presidential Material, who thought of that title? Barack Obama and John McCain.
When these were announced, it was around con season in the summer. It was right around after the primaries had finished. When these were announced, I think I pretty much let out a 10-minute eye roll. I went, oh God, you're kidding me. And I was just like, way to go, IDW, way to capitalize on whatever and all that kind of stuff. And I went into it with the worst possible attitude. And we probably should disclaim this, that we're not going to get into our political views.
I'll try not to.
You can probably guess, but and try to separate it. And personally, I'm not a big fan of politics, but these guys are. But this was just kind of like, it screamed to me opportunistic and all that kind of stuff. And I really had the worst attitude going into these books.
Just like us doing a show that comes out now about it.
Yeah, well, what are you gonna do? People in glass houses. But I think it's an important point to make, because then we got our hands on them.
Yeah,
and so what are they?
And I didn't have any idea what they were. And
I was just hoping they weren't like Super Obama and McCain
books.
Man.
Right.
They have pictures. They tell stories through words and pictures.
Yes, I know. But I was hoping that they weren't going to try to merge, the superhero kind of stereotypes with the presidential candidates, which has happened and is not,
What they're basically a biography of each man told in a relatively nonpartisan way. Yeah. They're straightforward. They let you know the person's background. They're written and drawn by different teams, so they're not both done in exactly the same style. But you know what? I found them to be both really interesting, really informative, and I think that if they were to get these out to people, if they were to get these out to voters, they would actually be really, really effective. More so than a lot of what I've seen. Yeah, that I had a very similar reaction when we finally got our hands on them. I sat down, I read them both, and I was completely surprised. I said, wow, these are really mature, these are really intelligent. They're basically biographies of both candidates, telling their stories of
who they are and how they got to this election and how they got and
research through history through the guys. They each wrote books, so some of the stuff's from there.
And this is a kind of thing that like IDW is a smaller publisher, and I go from rolling my eyes at them to applauding them, and like I hope these got into high schools, and I hope that these are the kind of things that in high school I would have eaten up because it's nonfiction. I mean, it's true. It's telling their stories, and it's not pushing either candidate. It's just being kind of reporting on it. They were meticulously researched, and I was very impressed by it.
It does a really good job of telling you who these guys are and where they come from.
Yeah.
And regardless of how you feel about either candidate or whatever, like at the end of it, they both come off as likable, respectable guys who try to do the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. I mean, say what you will, whether Republican or Democrat, they made it to be the presidential candidates. You've got to be somewhat of
you don't have to be likable to be the president.
No, well, Nixon shows that, but
no,
you've got to be able to get through some hoops in order to do that.
And somewhat exceptional.
Yes, it's an interesting story nonetheless.
Yeah.
And I think specifically with McCain and Obama, we've got two very different and very interesting stories. I think they were both. I mean, they filled in some gaps for me personally on them.
What I liked was that they didn't pull a lot of punches.
Yeah.
They talked about the shit that McCain did when he was younger. That was kind of awful.
Yeah.
They also showed what it was like when he was a POW. That was that's what they led with in that one.
Yeah. Which is
We'll get to that in 2 seconds. And then with Obama, he's like, well, he went through a period where he was sort of radical and he was doing drugs and drinking a lot, and it wasn't completely glossed over.
Right.
And with the Obama one, I really liked it. Like, his family life was messed up.
Yeah.
When you compare him to every other political candidate who's ever, except for, I guess, Clinton, actually. Clinton was a single family home, but Barack's was even especially more weird.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that jumps out when you look at these is the quality level and the talent level on this. It's not what you would expect from a book like. You'd get a book like this, you think they put all the money into the cover artist because the cover artist is a name, J. Scott Campbell.
Who put his name giant on those covers.
And it was the one thing, which is I wonder whether or not, because the creative teams on it were not, I mean, J. Scott Campbell just did the covers.
Yeah.
J. Scott Campbell's a great artist, but I wonder if the covers took away from the books because they put across a kind of cartoony raw view when the interior of the book doesn't match the cover at all.
When you open up the John McCain book, which is written by Andy Helfer and drawn by Stephen Thompson, the first page,
stunning.
It's really it's a powerful page. It's like
I opened it and I went, this is what it's like.
It's McCain in his cell, the bucket is next to him.
Oh, the bucket.
I mean, it's painted or watercolored.
This Stephen Thompson could, after reading this, he could do Captain America, I think.
Sure.
He could draw. I got that same, Epting, Perkins, kind of vibe.
At least in the war stuff, it gets a little photo referencey.
Yeah. Well, it's tough when you're drawing real people.
Right.
I mean,
you don't expect that. You don't. I mean, just the history of that kind of book, you expect a lower quality level.
Yeah.
And when you open up, and you see that they're actually really good artists on both books.
Yep.
Even in the Obama
Tom
book.
Morgan on the Obama book.
And Jeff Marriott wrote the Obama book, and I was more, and it's funny because I was more impressed with the art on the McCain book, but I was more impressed with the writing on the Obama book, and maybe because there's less of a story, but I felt at times the McCain book was very text heavy.
It got
very dense.
It got
very dense.
heavier as you went because when it was actually really interesting for a
the dude's
while.
old.
It was when he told his story for a really long time, up until the point where he gets into Senate and Congress, Congress and Senate.
Words.
And then all of a sudden, the blocks of text become very policy based, and they're talking about ideas as opposed to things happening.
Yeah.
For a long time, I mean, he apparently he was the Maverick.
Right.
Literally. I mean, it may have said that on his helmet. I'm not sure, but he was a guy who kept going back. He wanted to do another tour. He wanted to fly. He wanted to do. He was a pilot. He drove a Corvette. He slept around. That's not the guy that I'm seeing in the ads. But it seems like a foregone conclusion.
Everybody gets
knows
old.
it. Yeah.
Just look at the text box, the yellow boxes of text.
There's a lot of narration boxes and a lot of.
That's the only thing that could be daunting about this for a casual reader. If you handed it to a kid, it's a lot of.
Yeah, but that's the thing is I don't know because growing up I read before I got into comics proper before I got the sickness. I did read a lot of non-fiction-y kind of stories that were told in comics form. And when I was in 5th grade I would have loved this. I probably would have poured over. Yeah, totally.
Charles Keating, you like that part?
Yeah.
This is a savings.
I wouldn't have gotten it. I wouldn't have understood it. But So
It's also a different time. That was 20.
And then on
20
the
years
inside
ago.
cover of both of these, the first thing is educate yourself, make a decision, and vote.
yeah,
They're not partisan. They are not. These are trying to drive you towards one or the other. I mean, you could form your opinions based on the stories within.
Yeah.
But then
I mean,
again, I would follow up. I would do further research.
It is a little capitalizing on the election, but like you pointed out, so are we, and that's fine. But I was glad to see the voting stuff was pushed hard, and it was just a very classy approach to doing a book like this.
Well, and it's also it's worthwhile. I mean, I don't think there's anything in. I mean, there's an educational value to these. There's a social, responsible thing that they've done, and I'd be shocked how many comic book readers actually read them.
Yeah, I wonder how they sold. It's funny because I guess because they're public figures, you don't need to get approval or anything, right? I mean, like,
Yes.
I wonder if they've read it, if their people have gotten their hands on it.
They might be busy.
Yeah,
They've been doing some.
McCain's
things.
got to go to the bathroom every once in a while. It's like, where's that comic book?
These guys, they roll out of bed at 11. Like 6:30.
They really do
time.
They really do have an easy life. No, but
Especially right now. They have nothing to do right now.
dude, they're like all over the place. They're like one morning they're in West Virginia and the night they're in Kentucky. It's amazing. Or I don't know geography.
I wonder if they're carbon swapping.
Oh, they're not.
I doubt it.
Anyway,
It's just
Oh
really
shit! Where do I lie in the continuum? Oh no!
it's just really interesting to see just the level of care taken into these books, which is nice to see. It's nice to see they didn't just go for the easy sort of,
yeah,
simple story.
yeah.
No, they didn't. They didn't simplify. They didn't hold back. They told the whole thing. So I was really really impressed.
I was too.
And I didn't expect it at all.
And I'm sorry I rolled my eyes for 10 minutes. I should have looked into it before I jumped to a decision.
To be fair, his eyes dried out completely.
Yeah, it was.
We had to take him to the
painful. It was
hospital.
painful. Yeah.
It was horrible.
So we're going to take a quick break from our sponsors, but when we get back, we're going to talk about some other books that feature politics as a main plot point.
This episode of iFanboy is brought to you by Brain Tonic, the world's first think drink. It's got 0 caffeine and 0 processed sugar, but it's highly effective for increasing mental clarity. That focus comes from 2 herbs and 2 natural compounds, but it's sweetened only with organic agave nectar. Place an order for Brain Tonic online at www.braintonic.com and use the coupon code R3 for a discount anytime you purchase. iFanboy would like to thank Squarespace.com for sponsoring this episode. Squarespace is a publishing system for anybody looking to build a blog, a portfolio, or any kind of website. If you're looking to build a really neat website that looks just like the high-traffic, high-budget website, Squarespace has the tools that you need to do it with no coding experience required. If you've been thinking about starting up a website but you just didn't know how, get over to squarespace.com and try out a 14-day free trial. Use the code iFanboy when you get set up to let them know that we sent you. And of course, we got to tell you about GoDaddy. Web hosting from GoDaddy.com includes 99.9% uptime, 24/7 support, and free access to Hosting Connection, the place to install over 30 free applications sure to help you get the most from your hosting plan and website. If you want to make an impact online, GoDaddy.com has what you need. .com names for as low as $1.99, plus world-class hosting, fast and easy website builders, and much, much more. Get over to GoDaddy.com today and use the coupon code iFanboy to get 10% off of your purchase.
Now, those books were very specifically.
Those are about that election.
Real.
They're real. Yes.
Real. Well, they're not real.
Now, there's
Well, they're real.
They're comic books.
But they're real people.
Right.
Yeah.
Real
they were
events.
done by.
Don't
real people.
belittle our little thing here. We like the comics. Anyway, so
They're not real people. They're books.
they're real people. They're books about real people.
Right,
All right,
there
where
you
this is going nowhere.
This could go on for way too long.
So other books.
People are watching.
Other comics.
There's a couple of ways
If you
you
like
can
politics.
do it. You can bring in real politics into your book, or you can make up a political system and use that to possibly comment on it
Satire.
as it is. The one
Science fiction.
The first book that really got me in that
It's like
way
Alice in Wonderland.
was Transmetropolitan, which is set in the nearish future.
Yeah, it's a I think a reachable future. Mm-hmm. Not near future, but reachable.
And then lots of nanobots.
Yeah.
And it's about Spider Jerusalem, who is a journalist. And
Who's
the
a bi.
main thrust of this book by Warren Ellis and Darick Robertson,
Published by Vertigo.
published by Vertigo,
It's no longer in print.
it's over.
Yeah.
It ended in 2002 after.
But you can get all the trades. It's a fantastic
10
trade
trades.
run. Yeah.
Okay, we got that all out. Totally threw me off. Basically, the thrust of the entire run is that there is a guy in office, Gary Callahan, who Spider refers to as the Smiler because he's got that political smile, which is utter bullshit beneath it, but people like his teeth. And Spider is basically trying to report on stories and bring him down.
Spider Jerusalem's a journalist.
He's a gonzo.
He's very Hunter S. Thompson-esque.
Yep.
He comes out of retirement. He was in a seclusion in a mountain, comes back down, starts writing a column, and
He ran out of money and he owed them a book.
And he so he targets this president. It was the president.
Yep.
Targets the president and uses that attack as well as to address other social ills in society.
And it turns out that there's a murder conspiracy, so it's investigators who's trying to uncover that. He's doing the whole thing. The Smiler eventually becomes aware of him and sort of starts fighting back and just doing like Gary Callahan is the worst kind of politician. Like that's he's written as just the worst he could possibly get. Yeah. There's killings and murders and it's making a comment about the real world, but by using a lot of exaggeration and hyperbole. Really smart book, really dense. This story went on for 5 years.
It's just probably, for no other reason than just bias and idiot bias. I'm not a big fan of Ellis. But it's probably the best thing by Ellis I've ever read.
No, it is.
The most focused, the most, you could pick up the passion. When we look back on Warren Ellis's career, I think Transmetropolitan is going to be the book that you remember him for.
Transmetropolitan is two things. It's one, it's peon to journalism. Yep. It's like his love letter to the power of the writer and the word and what journalists could be if they were still journalists and not just publicists for political parties, which is what they are now.
A little commentary there.
And on both sides there. And the second thing is it's pure science fiction. Science fiction has always been, good science fiction, a commentary on the current society, always. Even Star Trek, even Asimov, it's always been a commentary on how society is now. And what this is saying, wake up, sheep. Because we're not that far off from this kind of world. And
it makes you think.
Good science fiction always makes you think about the world you're living in.
Yeah.
But it's also like it also manages to, because that can get very dry. It has a personality and a life of its own. It's fun, it's funny, and then at this other, like a couple of pages later, it's crushing, it's heartbreaking. It's incredibly unreal, but it's also very, very real. Literally, this presidential story goes the entire story through.
Yep.
Well, you never fully leave it. That's the thing.
Right.
Everything's
omnipresent, and you see the effect that Spider Jerusalem has as a journalist. You see, and it gets really intense towards the end. And it's just, it was one of those books that you guys read and loved when it was in issues, and I kind of avoided it. And then a couple of years ago, I don't know how I finally did, but I sat down and read them all.
Show.
It was the show, right? Yeah, we did a show, didn't we?
Yeah.
And I loved it. It was great. And one big thing, we're talking more about the content, but Darick Robinson's art. This is the best work of Darick Robinson's career.
It is a liberal book.
Yes, I think it does lean.
To be honest, if that's, but it's fake liberalism.
Yeah.
It's fictional.
Yeah.
I suppose. But also the world they're in is really, really awful.
Yeah.
Moving on from there, Brian K. Vaughan, maybe you've heard of him, is currently doing with Tony Harris a book called Ex Machina. That is how you pronounce it. And
not Ex Machina.
Ex Machina. And this takes a different. It exists in our world. Mitchell Hundred is the mayor of New York City, and he has the superpower from somewhere.
He was working for the Coast Guard or something like that, and he's
an engineer.
He's an engineer, and he was on a boat by the Brooklyn Bridge and found an alien kind of thing that kind of attacked him. And when he woke up, he had this like kind of circuitry in his face, and he could speak to machines.
And basically the story. And this isn't the very first issue, so I'm not blowing this for you. He stops the second plane from hitting the second tower, and I remember reading the book like, oh, this is literally, and it wasn't very long after 9/11.
Well, what happened was, so he has this power to speak to machines, and so he decides he needs to help the world. So he grew up reading comic books, so he decides to become a superhero called the Great Machine. And
what's cool about it though is that this is as if it was in the real world. So his costume is
cobbled together,
clunky,
and he's got a helmet, and he's got a jetpack. He's got a friend, this Russian dude Kremlin, who makes him a jetpack, and he has, and he goes. He does. It was almost as if, what if in the real world someone becomes a superhero, and so he does this, and he's a vigilante, and the police are after him, but he's just trying to help people. And and all through the series, there are flashbacks to his time as the Great Machine, and it's just this mistake after mistake, which ultimately leads to him realizing, I'm not helping people doing this. I could help people if I ran for mayor.
Right.
And so he runs for mayor as an independent. Which he can do
because after the Trade Center thing, he becomes a hero. He reveals his identity, and New York City goes for him. And it's really an interesting view of what it's like to run the city. The powers
city politics.
Very much so. Yeah. But it goes all over the place, from social politics to the business of things. And one of the things that's really interesting about Mitchell Hundred is that he's written to be nonpartisan. He's written to be, some of the things he does are very liberal, and some of the things he does are very conservative.
He's a maverick.
He's a...
He is.
Tell that to Joe Plumber. And eventually, like, he basically has aspirations to go for the presidency, and that's sort of where we're going now.
Well, it's the interesting thing about the book is it's at least parts half just him in his office having meetings, and half it's flashing back to when he was a superhero. And honestly, for me, the stuff where he's in superhero stuff is really not very interesting. It's the stuff where he's in the office running for mayor and dealing with not running for mayor, being the mayor, dealing with the cops and dealing with these people and dealing with the problems, and that's
snow removal.
That stuff's all interesting to me. Yeah. It's really, you wouldn't expect that from a. What's this book about? About being the mayor.
Yeah.
All right.
No, but it's really engaging, and it's it takes place in New York City, and so it's in a world that's very similar to our own, so it's very relatable. It's just really, really well done. Each issue is meaty, and each story arc that comes up in the trades is really has got a definitive thrust, and it's some aspect whether there's a lot of dealing with art and things like that. So it's
the writer Brad K Vaughan used to live in New York, so he would pull from the news stories today.
Yeah.
He knows the city really well, so that helped. A couple of other things we wanted to mention really quickly. If you go into the DC universe, there's been some politics that showed up there. Lex Luthor.
Lex Luthor was the president for a long time in the DC universe. He ran for
2000?
president. Yeah, it was in the early 2000 period for a couple of years. He was for a while, which they mirrored in Smallville, and then the TV show. And Green Arrow was the mayor of Star City for a while too. In his
1 year later.
Yep. Yeah. So for a while. So DC plays a fictional politics, whereas Marvel does the real world politics.
The whole thing about the Marvel universe is it's our universe that takes place in our. So all through the years of Marvel, whoever's the president is the president in the Marvel universe. So for example, in the Ultimates, when it was a very big kind of international story, George Bush was right there, and nothing was really kind of said about his policies, but you could tell Mark Miller was having.
And that goes all the way back to Kennedy when Marvel first started. Kennedy was the president, but. In the DC world, the fictional world, if you can do that, you can have Lex Luthor be the president. You can have Green Arrow be a mayor of the city, and you can do stuff like that.
But it's interesting that even DC and Marvel, both very different, they've always had that political influence in their universes.
If you're
in art, you can't not have.
If you're an intelligent writer and you're thinking about what makes this world tick, it's impossible to miss that stuff. So if you have these guys who are flying around who are basically living weapons of mass destruction, wow, why did I say that? There has to be somebody,
And Marvel, Civil War, the government was involved, the Mutant Registration Act, all these things.
It's always been very heavy.
There's always senators, Senator Kelly in the X-Men, and so politics, comics, they're a nice little mixture of the two.
There's no shortage of that stuff, and it usually, if done well and not done in a way that is very specific, is usually very interesting.
Yeah.
If you make it a tome against a current specific politician, it doesn't tend to work as well, I don't think.
Right.
I don't have an example.
Right. All right. So if there's some books that talk about politics that we did mention here that you want to tell us about, you can email us at contact@ifanboy.com.
Or you can call.
I didn't know what order we were doing this in. Or you can call the voicemail line at 888-FANBOYS, which is 326-2697. You can leave us a voicemail about these books or others.
You can get to www.ifanboy.com to talk about this show or any of the other stuff we have up. There's lots of discussions, usually not terribly political.
Yeah. And if you're in the United States, Election Day is next Tuesday, so make sure you go vote.
Good Lord.
No matter who you vote
if you're over
for,
18,
go vote.
Yeah, go vote.
We're still doing our show.
Hello. She's catching that open for business. Hello. I turned this lamp on.